So in this episode, we are going to actually get started cutting our mats. Now, last episode we unboxed our mat cutter. We ran out of time, so we had to extend into this episode with this. But what we were able to do was take the samples that we received and actually put them on the piece of art that you're going to be able to see, finally, the piece we're working on. We chose a few different shades that we have placed on order. Now, they were supposed to be here 2 days ago. They're not here, but you'll see a little bit of our process through which we selected the matte colors we wanted. They are in order, but I did in the meantime pick up some smaller pieces of matting that I wanted to use, because I do want to do some test cuts before we actually cut the production pieces. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do a first cut using our mat cutter, and then we are going to do the final cuts for the actual piece we're going to do. So if you follow along right now, you'll see a little bit of our process for actually selecting the mats, and then we'll do our practice cuts, and when I go through that I'll explain the process. We're going to do a two mat cut, and it's a very interesting set of steps in order to make this happen, but it should work very well, and we'll for sure see how well this cutter does. But based on the videos I've watched, the amount of reading of how to do this, it looks like it's going to go very smoothly and should come out really nice. So you'll see at the end how it works, and we'll have our mats ready to go, and all we'll have left to do is get the frame stock in and make the frame, and then we'll be able to put everything together and we'll have our finished piece. So we won't put the cart before the horse. Let's cut the mats first and get this stage done. So come along and let's get it going. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at some of the tools we have getting ready to actually cut our mats. Now, the actual blades that are used are these Logan standard 270 blades right here. So the way the blades fit in the tools, you can actually just use one corner of a blade and then flip it over and use the other corner. Now, based on information I picked up from watching some videos, you can cut about 6 mats before you have to change the blade. So that means you can get about 12 mats per blade. Now, as I said, the cutter actually comes with 4, but I went ahead and invested in buying some more. So I got this pack of 100 here. So if each blade can cut 12 mats, for this $20 pack of blades, we'll be able to cut 1,200 mats. So that's a pretty good investment, I think. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go over the cutting tools really quickly. We're going to cut some practice mats, and then get ready to actually attempt to do some bevel cutting. So we're going to start with the mat knife. We'll go ahead and put the blade in that, and then we'll actually be using this one here shortly. So the mat knife, to put a blade in, it has this, as you can see, this hand-turned nut here, which you can pull off. The blade then goes right over that post, and then you can put the nut back on. Now with this, there's 3 settings for the blade. There's the current setting, and then there's a middle section, and you lock it down, and that is for cutting mats. And then you can go to the 3rd setting right there, and this is used for cutting foam board. Since we'll be cutting mats, we'll go to the 2nd setting here, and we'll just lock it down, and we'll be ready to cut in just a moment. Now the bevel mat cutter, we will also put the same blade in. It's again the Logan 270, and this will actually go in pretty much the same way. But there's an item of interest that goes along with this particular blade cutter that we'll talk about in just a moment. So let's pick up the razor blade. Make sure we have the sharp side. It's hard to tell. Okay, and we will place the blade. Now you'll notice I'm sliding it through the cutting area there, and we will bolt it down. Now we can't actually adjust this cutter using this bolt here. What we have here on the bottom, if you can see that, is a tiny flat screw. So turning the screw clockwise will decrease the blade depth for the cut, which in other words makes for a shallower cut, and turning it counterclockwise allows for a deeper cut. And this is important because if you have the blade set to cut too deeply as you're cutting using the tool, you will find that you will start seeing overcuts, and overcuts are basically a ruined mat. You'll have to start over at that point. So make sure you set your blade depth correctly. Right, so now what I want to do is I've got these sheets, they're 24 by 36, and I want to practice on these, but I don't want to practice on one this size. I want to cut it down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is take my T-square here, and let's get a center line here. So this is 20 by, okay, so 20 inches, and let's get a 10 here. Let's go ahead and mark the line down the center, and we'll go ahead and cut this. So I've got the T-square, I'll square it up, draw the line. Okay, we've got a line drawn. Let's go ahead and do the green one as well. All right. So here we have these practice pieces with a center line drawn. We're going to go ahead and cut these. Now, since we're just cutting a straight cut on these, there's no bevel cut. So on the mat cutter, they've got a straight cut guide that you can use just to do a straight cut with. And one of the cool things about this mat cutter is, while you can use it to measure and cut specific things, you can also remove the mat guide here completely. Now you have a tool that you can do these straight cuts with. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and place our mat, and without the slip sheet, you do not use the slip sheet for this. So we're going to put our mat inside the tool, and we're going to take it right to the edge. Now the guide, the cutting guide, I don't have my tool set to cut there. The cutting guide is right here on the edge. So what you're going to do is you're going to line this up right on the edge and run it right down, straight down. So let's go ahead and get this lined up. Okay. We're just going to carefully use the mat cutter and cut a straight line right down. And there we have it. Alright, and now we'll just go ahead and cut the green one really quickly, and then we'll be ready to move on with the I want to cut it. I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure this time and cut it all the way through. Alright. Okay. Perfect. So now we have the greens and the whites that we're going to cut the bevels on, and we're going to do that here in just a minute. Alright, so I apparently didn't turn my main video camera on for this next part, so we're going to have to narrate this on the fly here. So one of the things we're getting ready to do here is to cut our first beveled mat. So to do this, we need to go ahead and return the mat guide back into the system, and I believe we're going to set this first cut to be a 2-inch width. So let's go ahead and get into the action here as we start to get ready to cut. So we're setting the mat guide for 2 inches for this first cut, locking it down. The primary piece for this first cut is going to be a green sheet of green mat. We're doing mint green and white here. So this green mat, we're doing it 2 inches, and we're going to go ahead and mark the cut lines. Now the person who is teaching the seminar I watched said really get the pencil in there. You don't want to be parallel or cutting vertically or marking vertically on the sheet. You want to really get the pencil into the base of where the guide is there. So we're cutting we're marking our 4 lines, and these are going to be our start and stop lines for our bevel cutter when we go ahead and engage that. So in this instance, our width is going to be 2 inches all the way around. We're going to go ahead and slip the mat under the protector, the holder there, and we're going to get our blade out. Now, so we want to make sure we note that we have the notches, the nylon notches here, and those go on the rail that are on this this guide. And we're going to move the guide to the start and stop line. Now, if you see, there's a marker here on the tool. That's what you line up with the start line and the stop line in order to get the cut right. So we're going to go ahead and place the cutter on the rail, and then what we do is we engage the blade by pushing down the button, and then we hold everything together by putting our hand on the rail there, and then we run the cutter right up that line, and we stop right dead on the stop line that we drew earlier. We disengage the blade. It's very important that the blade be disengaged before it is actually removed from the rail. Okay, so we have for the next cut, we engage the blade, and then we go ahead and cut the mat, starting on the start line to the stop line. So there's cut number 2. You have to be very careful, because if you go past the stop line, you'll have an overcut, and it'll basically ruin your mat. You'll have to start over. All right, for the third cut, position the cutter, engage the blade, hold everything down, firmly move the cutter up the line, and end it at the stop line. Disengage the blade, remove the cutter, and we go to cut the 4th cut here. So what should happen when this 4th cut is made is that the inner area should just drop right out of the mat board, and you should have your complete cut there. Now, I had a little bit of trouble with this one. Since it was my first cut, I did have a little bit of not through cut, and I made the mistake of trying to pull the that off, and I tore the mat just a little bit right here. But since it was a test cut, not a whole lot. It was a lesson learned for sure, but not a whole lot of anxiety over that. So I did have a little mark there on the front mat that I had to contend with. Okay, so now we're getting ready to cut the second mat, and there's a technique here that I learned from watching a Logan series, where you actually use the primary mat as your guide, and you go ahead and adhere the second mat to the first mat, and then use the first mat as your slip sheet. And then, because the fact that you cut the second mat down just a little bit, like a 1/4 inch, so that none of it is used within the guide. So if you see right here, I'm cutting that 1/4 inch off here. But so you cut that little bit off so it's smaller than the initial piece, because you want to use the initial piece as your guide, so that way, you know, you're guaranteed that you're going to have you know, the perfectly parallel cuts with the other pieces. So this will be just slightly smaller than the first one. And then what you do is you go ahead and apply adherent, and that's what's going to happen in the next section. You apply adherent to the first one and go ahead and adhere the second piece on, and then from there you can go ahead and complete your double mat cut on the second piece. And it is actually quite a neat technique, and it works really well. So we're going to go ahead and describe that here. We're going to be going back to the original video source, and we will finish this first mat cut for you here in just a moment. Okay, so we've made it through the first cut, not without some problems, but again, this is our first time doing this, so we are learning as we go. So here's our first external bevel. We're going to use one of these white sheets as the accent piece, but to do that, to do the perfect cut, they were teaching us how to use this initial piece as the master. So what we want to do is take this initial cut, and we'll put it here on the work table. We're going to put some adhesive on this. Now, the important thing is to stay a little bit far away from the edges, because we're going to want to have the spots. So let's go ahead and put some adhesive down. Oops, that was not very good. Let's try it again. Okay. A little bit more right there. And we want to put an X here in the middle, because we want this piece to be attached to the middle piece of the next one. We want to keep it away from the edges for the most part. Okay, so we're going to lay the back piece up again on this, and then we're going to prepare. Now, we will not need a slip sheet for this second cut, because the bottom mat will act as the slip sheet. All right, so now, the outer width of the bottom one was 2 inches. So we want the next one to be 2 1/4 inches, because we want to have a 1/4 inch differential there. So let's set the mat gauge for 2 1/4. All right, there. And now we will draw our lines for our start and stop lines for this at 2 1/4 now. All right, and let's go ahead and cut. We have our bevel cutter. We'll place it at the start point. Okay, see it? We will engage the blade. We will try to make a better cut than last time. Practice makes perfect. Oh, I see. As I was starting to push that, the blade came up a little bit, and maybe that's something that I've experienced. So maybe that's why the cut wasn't so well. We just have to be very careful and cognizant about our cut. Okay, we disengage the blade, we turn it, and we get ready for our next cut. Engage the blade, and let's keep some pressure, good pressure going. Nice smooth cut. Okay. Disengage the blade. Okay, engage the blade. Make our cut. .90 degrees, and this should be our last cut. And we should have a perfectly cut double mat when this is completed. All right, disengage the blade. Okay, and that falls right out, and look at that. That is a perfectly cut, minus that little mistake. Perfectly cut beveled edges, perfectly centered, a little overcut there. That can be, looks like it can be fixed with a little bit of, but look at that. I'm not terribly proud of that, but for a first attempt, you know, you certainly don't want to try that on your final mats for your piece of artwork. Now, I think it's invaluable having done this test cut. I learned quite a bit from it. I'll probably do some more test cuts before I feel totally comfortable before cutting my final piece. But you'll see me cut my final one here in just a moment. All right? We'll be back and we'll try that final cut here, and we'll see how it goes. So I have to admit, I had another malfunction with my main camera filming this last portion. The file corrupted for some reason. I don't know why, but whatever. So this is the last part where we're actually cutting the mats for our project. Didn't spend a lot of time explaining anything. Matter of fact, I cut it down a lot because really it's just a repeat of what we've done, and it is the execution of a lot of the things that we learned in this, you know, in the initial first cuts. So I'm taking what I learned and I'm applying it, and I'm just going to let you watch out the rest of this video until the cut is complete, and listen to a little bit of music. See you on the other side. And there you have it, the completed first part of this project. We have the mats cut, and that is all. But it's a significant step considering we had never cut mats before in our lives. So it looks pretty good, I think. The next step will be we will make the frame, and then we will follow that up with putting it all together and finishing it up. And those will all be included in the next episodes of this video trail. Thanks for coming, and come on back for the next episode, and we'll try to learn some more stuff. See ya.